Standing on the castle balcony, I gazed at the crescent moon in the night sky, filled with anxiety. Am a werewolf, yet am forced into an ancient and absurd tradition pairing with powerful males. I despise this arranged fate, but I have to face it. Let's officially listen to today's werewolf story. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for your support. Chapter 1. I couldn't fathom how this antiquated tradition of pairing shifter females with powerful males had ever come into existence. If I ever discovered the originator of this custom, I'd make sure they received a swift and painful lesson in empathy. My rebellious nature bristled at the thought of conforming to such outdated practices. Despite my reservations, I understood my responsibilities and was determined to face them head-on. Even as anxiety gnawed at my insides, our sleek black limousine crawled to a halt behind another vehicle as I gazed out the window at the waxing crescent moon. The soft yellow light tugged at something deep within my chest, a sensation that intertwined with the knot of anxiety already present in my stomach. I felt a connection to the moon that seemed to mirror my own conflicted emotions. However, the moon's influence was the least of my worries tonight. My attention was fixed on the looming castle in the distance and those who awaited us inside. The imposing structure seemed to embody all the traditions I longed to challenge. "Elise, stop fidgeting with your dress," my mother chided, leaning forward to pry my hands away from the delicate fabric I had been unconsciously mangling. She looked immaculate, as always, in a modest silver gown with long sleeves that tapered into gloves covering her slender fingers. Her dark hair was elegantly styled, and her makeup was flawless, despite the fact that she likely wouldn't spend much time at the castle. Appearances were everything to her, a stark contrast to my own self-conscious nature. Her beauty had undoubtedly played a role in her marriage into our powerful family. Her perfection and preparedness for any situation made it challenging to be her daughter. I felt inadequate in my own skin, let alone in this ostentatious attire. "This dress is absurd," I complained, longing to shed it like a snake discarding its too tight skin. The floor-length evening gown, adorned with red sequins, barely covered my body yet managed to pinch and chafe in all the wrong places, reminiscent of an unpleasant intimate encounter. It felt like a physical manifestation of the societal constraints I desperately wanted to break from. My mother's eyes narrowed, her concern for social status evident in her disapproving gaze. But before she could reprimand me, my grandfather intervened. He placed his weathered hand on hers, silently communicating that he would handle the situation, as both our Pax Alpha and the Edric Alpha presiding over all shifters in the region. His authority was absolute, and we both recognized it. His commanding presence filled the limousine, a reminder of the power dynamics at play. "Elise will wear the dress with pride," he declared, his deep, resonant voice seeming to command not just us but the very air around us. "She understands the significance of this event for all of us." His words left no room for argument, but I couldn't help feeling a surge of defiance, even as I nodded in reluctant acquiescence. Grandfather was attired in a simple black suit, his silver hair slicked back. He required no elaborate gowns or glittering jewels, yet he wore the most striking adornment of all, the Edric Alpha necklace. My gaze was drawn to it, a symbol that proclaimed his supreme authority. As his granddaughter, that symbol served as a constant reminder of the perfection expected of me tonight. I stared out the window, the responsibility settling over me all over again. I didn't want to hear how important this was, how important I was to the survival of our pack. Thought again. I knew it all too well, though that didn't make things any easier. I was 19 for Moon's sake. I barely made good choices on what breakfast to eat. Cocoa Pebbles was a winner instead of the bacon and eggs I was supposed to be eating, and I was the best chance of our family's survival. I had my doubts, but I had to trust my grandfather, even if to me this seemed like the mother of all bad ideas. Worse than the time my mom put me in a white dress and let me loose in a muddy backyard at my cousin's and old Fest's 10th birthday party. Despite my compliant mood, Grandfather didn't appear satisfied, so he leaned forward until his face was only a short distance from mine. I stared into his lined face. Wispy white hair framed it. When had he aged so much? I knew he was well into his 25th decade, but werewolf shifters could live much longer than humans. Why then? Did he look as if he might break apart if the wind blew too sharply? The worry in my chest diminished as he started his tried and true lecture. The mating ritual is sacred, a right of our people to pass on our traditions to the next generation. Strong red water lines are what have kept us rave and moons alive. Strong red water lines are what will keep us from succumbing to our enemies. I had heard this a million times from my grandfather. We learned it as pups in school, along with math and literature, and how to fight. Yet now, as the castle loomed in the distance before me, I realized it had never sunk in. It was my job to secure a strong mate. My job was to keep my family and red water line going. It was even more important for me than the other girls here. My grandfather was the Edric Alpha, head of all the packs in our region, a position that HED held for over 1,000 moons and took much strength and coming to traits I would need to use during the games to keep our family strong. Except it somewhat hoped this moment would never come, and I would, perhaps, get to marry for love. Or maybe, even better, I'd get to go to human college and then I'd get to go to parties and dance until dawn and pretend I didn't have to worry about pack fights and my family's desire to hold on to the Edric Halfan Equison hour it wielded. But deep down, I'd known there would be no escaping this. And regardless of all my silly dreams, I would not skirt my responsibilities. I sighed again, my chest straining against the thin slit of fabric that covered it. I understand. Grandfather, I'm going to take this seriously. But why this? I gestured to the ridiculous gown. Why the pageantry? Why the stupid dresses and hair? You know I hate all the fuss. My blonde hair had been washed and blow-dried, and makeup had been caked on my face as if I was some sort of celebrity. I was practical, which included avoiding getting dolled up for anyone. I hated how this felt like a masquerade. Would the maids participating in the games expect me to look like a Barbie all the time? If they did, they'd have another thing coming. I preferred messy buns and plain, old cherry lip balm. Grandfather patted my wrist lovingly, resting his wrinkled hand there. It's for the males. Dove, he said, using his pet name for me. You know they are a visual bunch, and first impressions are important. He winked as if we were in on a joke together, though I turned my head. I loved my grandfather, but he was old school, so I bit my tongue and stared at the castle as if I could peer inside. What would the males be like? Rude assholes, knuckle-dragging fools with dog breath. Hopefully not. They were supposed to be the most eligible shifter bachelors in this half of the country, and for my sake, I prayed they would be more into me rather than this glittery dress and shiny hair. Holding my judgment, I tried not to get my hopes too high. Better to be surprised than disappointed. Mother pushed my hair back in a loving gesture while glancing past me out the window. Nightshade Barrow Castle is known worldwide as one of the most beautiful places on Earth, even if it was one zoned by filthy vampires. Still, I'd love to see inside. I think we're only allowed to see you as far as the front door. I pondered this. I wonder if their stink still lingers even if they've not been in residence for centuries. She shrugged, gazing longingly into the distance. This year, the packs wanted to make these mating games special, and what better place than a castle with sprawling grounds? I hear the gardens are splendid. The gates are opening. Grandfather pointed. His finger trembled a bit, or so it seemed. He lowered his hand too quickly for me to be sure. He was right. Huge iron gates swung open. The line of limos began to crawl through like black beetles being swallowed by a giant maw. I wiped sweating palms on my dress, not caring if it got stained or wrinkled. Let any male who wanted me know exactly the kind of person I was. It would do no good to start a relationship based on lies. Just be yourself, my mother said. Grandfather added, be nice, but males like a female who will listen and laugh at their jokes. I pursed my lips together, choking back all the things I longed to say. Instead, I watched my grandfather's face as we drove in. remembering the words inscribed on our family crest. Familia my preses dierais. Family above all else. The castle loomed large. True, it was splendid. Ancient turrets rose into the moonlight, their tips seeming to touch the stars. The stone walls appeared to stretch out for miles, indicating room upon room of splendor within. The grounds were just as immaculate, with trimmed hedges, uplit trees, and topiaries shaped like birds. Or were those bats? I reminded myself that this place had once belonged to vampires, our dangerous neighbors, and traces of them might still be found here. Still, bats. Gross. Thank the moon they didn't live here anymore. And the castle was more of an attraction than anything else. The limo slid to a stop, tires crunching on gravel. Out my window, I spied the massive stone steps leading to giant doors that were flung open. Warm light poured from inside, showing off a glittering chandelier and marble floors. Giant floral arrangements brought life and color to the stone and steel. It was quite breathtaking. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad. But when I glanced around, I didn't see any sign of the males and their families. Odd. Where are they? I asked, glancing back at my mother. The males. I am sure they are here somewhere. She craned her neck, trying to peer inside the castle. I wish your father could be here to see this. I nodded, wishing it too. I missed his quiet demeanor and calming presence. My father had stayed home with the rest of our small pack. He was a simple man who enjoyed the comforts of home. Plus, I had a feeling he did not approve of his little girl being trotted out like a hunk of meat. But it was clear he lost that argument. He lost all the arguments when my mother and grandfather were concerned. Hurry, the other girls are getting out, she said, ignoring my question and pushing on me from behind. Fumbling for the handle, I found it and pushed the limo door open. On the other side, the driver appeared, a surprised look on his face. I can get it. Miss. Oh, right. Etiquette. Thanks. I was sure to be blushing beneath my glittering red gown. I waited for him to open the door fully before stepping out. The high-heeled shoes had been forced to wear wobbled on the gravel, but I somehow managed to stand. A brisk breeze reminded me of how much of my body was exposed to the night air, but my comfort barely mattered. Right, there were males to please, eyes to pop out of their sockets with the simple force of my assets. It seemed the other girls were subjected to the same horrors. Besides me, other females stepped out of their limos in similar slit fabric. Blues, yellows, pinks, and greens draped over stunning female forms as my opponents surveyed each other. The 9 other contestants were far sexier than me. These girls were all beauty queens, the kind that paid attention to things like what color looked best on them and what cut of fabric would draw a male's eye. They would scorn at my cherry lip balm. Still, I couldn't help but look at their fashionably thin arms and weak legs. I bet I could outdo them in hand-to-hand combat any day. Appearance lost everything. Not for a shifter. Anyway, still, I felt like a fish out of water. Oh moons. I was screwed. Everything in me wanted to crawl back in that limo, but the driver had already shut the door with a thud, closing the avenue of escape for good. Besides, mother and grandfather were standing behind me, and I knew my mother could tackle with the best of them. They would drag me back into this competition faster than you could say child abuse. So we stood, shivering in the cool night air, waiting. What's taking so long? I muttered, only to get a swift poke from my mother. But could she blame me? My butt was freezing. They should be here, I heard another girl say. So I was the only one who felt something was off. Was this all a ploy to gain the upper hand? Make us wait in the cold until our rescuers arrived? Give me a break. The sharp gasp from a girl beside me drew me out of my thoughts. I dragged my eyes up as another cry echoed from the crowd. What in the 7 hells? Figures were descending from the balconies. Dark, hooded shapes dropped down, landing with a crunch of gravel as black cakes billowed around them. More and more descended, circling us. My heart pounding. I shot a look over my shoulder to see more shadowy figures coming in from behind. We were surrounded. "Is this part of it?" I asked, positioning my body in front of my mother and grandfather as my eyes took in all threats. 7 hooded figures in front of me. 2 to the side, or behind. I couldn't fight that many, but if we ran, you're surrounded. A voice boomed. No sense in running or doing anything foolish. This doesn't sound like part of the game. The girl beside us whined. The females were crumbling like flowers left in the hot sun. One appeared to have fainted. Others were cowering beside their parents. Some had scrambled back into limos, but the gates had been shut behind us. Trapped. I grabbed my mother's wrist with one hand and grandfather's with another. I had to get them out first. Then I could help the other girls. A hooded figure stepped toward me, body tensed in a crouch. I let go of my family and fisted my hands. My heels would be an issue, but I'd have to make do. Or I could shift into my wolf form and fight that way. Whoever these shifters were. The figure pushed his hood back and a male face, pale and angular, stared back at me. He opened his mouth and grinned as fangs slid past his lower lip. "Vampire." "No," a girl screamed. I jolted as it all clicked into place. These weren't our would-be mates. These were vampires. Our enemies. This was an ambush. "Get in the limo." I shouted at my mother and grandfather as I readied for a fight, ripping off the heels. I threw them at the vampire's face, kissing, and then started for me. "Enough." A voice boomed. The vampires stopped as if frozen by this command. They glanced up, eyes locking on a solitary figure standing on the balcony above the main entrance. The figure was godlike, a statue bathed in golden hues, standing alone on the parapet as he peered down on all of us. His dark hair was swept back and his eyes glittered. The tuxedo was a bit much, but he wore it like a runway model, despite the bulky muscle filling out every fiber of the bespoke suit. The girl beside me gasped for an entirely different reason. "Caspian Nightshade," my grandfather said. "It can't be." Caspian Nightshade, the most eligible vampire bachelor who was always plastered over every supernatural magazine. Despite being a vampire, everyone here knew who he was. Heir to the most powerful vampire family, the Nightshades. They were rumored to be worth billions. Even shifter girls thought he was easy on the eyes. Didn't he have some club in Mykonos to lurk around? What was he doing here? Before I could ask, Caspian gave his final command. "Bring them inside, and no one gets hurt." Then he turned, jumped off the parapet as if it were the easiest thing in the world, and disappeared into the castle. Chapter to what the hell just happened. I stared open, mouthed at the balcony where the vampire had just been. My head spinning. I cast my gaze around at the other stunned females. They were all as shocked as I was, as were their parents and guardians. No one had been expecting to come here and be ambushed by vampires. No one was prepared to mount a fight against dozens of fit and dangerous red water suckers. Why had they done this? What had a tentative peace in the last few decades? Had it just come to an end? And Caspian Nightshade, what could he possibly gain from disturbing the mating games? I had no idea. Whatever the reason, we needed to do something. Fighting in our human form wouldn't work, but we were shifters. In our wolf form, we would be able to go toe with these vamps. No problem. If I shifted now, I might be able to take out a few of the guards and get my mother and grandfather to safety. I would teach them a lesson. I called my wolf forward. Nothing happened. I tried again. Still nothing. What the something was preventing me from accessing my shifting powers. It was as if someone had flicked off the switch. That ability seemed blocked. Though, by magic or some other force. I didn't know. Shit. This was bad. We have to get out of here, I said to my mother as the vamp guards turned and began to approach. It seemed they acted on Caspian Nightshade's whim. The Golden God. It was what the magazines called him, but I only needed to think of him as a life-sucking leech. The one who had told the other vamps to take us inside. Why, nothing good. For sure. And why didn't the coward come down here and do it himself? I'd like to see him try. Instead of the golden god himself, a disgusting incubus with dark eyes and pale skin came at me. He hissed as he approached, needle-like fangs bared. He was at least a foot taller than me, with 100 pounds on my human form. Still, I squared up with him all the same. Come on, you sorry excuse for Dracula. Let's see what you've got. Elise? No, my mother begged, clawing at my arm. We can't shift. She'd figured it out. We were vulnerable. However, I was going to just give in. My hands formed into fists as the brainless Edward Cullen wannabe came within biting range. Everyone, stand down. My grandfather's voice boomed in my head. More than words. It was a command. Something we could not disobey. I had no choice but to drop my arms. An Alpha's word was law. I knew he must be gripping the Alpha necklace in his fist as he gave the Alpha command. One that no one could refuse, once uttered. I stared at him. Useless, impotent and afraid. My worry mounted as I watched my grandfather. He was frail, ancient. A fight would put him in grave danger. So maybe he was doing the right thing. Maybe he meant to reason with the vampires. Maybe he knew something I didn't. But why had he given this command? Why not fight? Survival. My brain came up with the answer as soon as I asked the question. The vamps had orchestrated this takeover to perfection. We were at their mercy. The vamp in front of me smirked, moonlight glinting off his fangs. A scar ran down his cheek. Likely a mark HED had before HE been turned into the dead thing that stood in front of me. Come on, little doggy. Be a good girl. I sneered. That ugly face. I'll remember it for later. He laughed humorlessly. Feel free. I'm sure we'll meet again. I wanted to dig my claws into his cheeks. But before I had time, two other vamps appeared and latched onto my arms. As I struggled, they dragged me up the steps into the castle. My heart was pounding as I took everything in. Wide open doors. The sickeningly sweet scent of hundreds of red roses in porcelain vases. Bright glittering lights burning above. A grand spiral staircase. The sound of many footsteps. More vamps. It was as if the beauty of the castle had rotted in a few minutes. Now the flowers smelled a sticky sweet. The colors seemed harsh and the light blaring. It smells like death in here, one of the girls behind me said. Another was quietly crying. It made me feel better to know that not everyone was giving in so easily. I glanced back to see a blonde female being escorted in by the vamps. She was slender and beautiful. The type of girl made for these mating games. Her dress was still perfect, as were her long, gold tresses and fake lashes. The haughty expression on her face told me she was used to this type of treatment and was about to let someone know. Do you know who my father is? Was the last thing I heard her say before I was pulled away. It only took a few minutes before all the females were dragged inside the castle. Soon, 10 of us stood in a semicircle with our vampire handlers at our sides. We had been led away from the main entrance and into a large gathering hall. Again there were flowers, crystal chandeliers, and ornate furniture. But now I saw them for what they really were, props in the vampire's game. What I didn't see were the parents and grandparents. Where's my family? I demanded, yanking against the vampire's tight grip. The panic was real now. What if something happened to them? What if the vampires were harming them right now? Where are they? Let me go. You parasite. Relax. They are safe. I glanced up to see two people descending the stairs, Caspian, and another who looked much like him, but older. Father and son. Was it possible? Had they both been turned? Had one turned the other? The resemblance was too eerie, not to be real. I tried to remember what the magazines had said about the elder Nightshade, but it was clear I had not paid enough attention. Another thing that was clear was that these two were in charge. Where are my mother and grandfather? I growled, staring at Caspian. I want to see them. He arched an eyebrow. I didn't want to notice that he was the most attractive man ever seen. I didn't want to marvel at the way his eyes sparkled or the perfect shape of his well. toned body beneath his expensive suit, not to mention the raw masculinity he used. He could teach classes in male magnetism. No wonder all the magazines splattered him on their covers. Why the room had suddenly grown silent. I could almost hear my female shifters' counterparts panting with want. I wanted to hate Caspian Nightshade, but I couldn't, which made me think he was using some kind of power over me. He had to be. Didn't vampires have the ability to enthrall their prey? That must be why I couldn't take my eyes off him. "What's your name?" he asked, evaluating me. Our gazes held. A moment passed, or an eternity. His eyes were so entrancing. I felt myself falling into them, swirling toward him on a trail of champagne bubbles that tingled my skin in all the right places. I wanted to giggle. I wanted to dance. I wanted to fall into his strong arms, yank his shirt apart, and lick my way down. I blinked and shook my head. Vampire trickery. That had to be it. I hated vampires. We all did. I jutted my chin as I gave him a disgusted glare. "I'll give you my name when you tell me where my family is." Vampire filth. There was a hint of an amused smile on his mouth as he answered. "Fair question. Elise. That's your name, isn't it? Elise Raven Moon. Enough about her," the blonde female beside me said. "What's going on here?" Reluctantly, Caspian's eyes dragged away from mine. "Isolde Thorne. Nice to meet you. I've heard a lot about your pack." She seemed to brighten at this, shivering a little under his gaze. It seemed she was also feeling his weird power. "Of course you have. Everyone here has." Ah, she was a thorn. Pompous, arrogant, and power. Hungry were the three words that came to mind when I thought of her pack. "You both ask a fair question," Caspian said in answer. "Ladies, your families are safe and will be escorted off castle grounds. No harm will come to them or to you." "How can we know you're telling the truth?" I asked, not liking any of this. Caspian nodded slowly. "I'm afraid you have no choice. But really you shouldn't worry. You're our guests for the mating games." "We," he said, gesturing to a few of the vampires who had gathered at the base of the stairs. "Are your mate choices?" "What?" He couldn't be serious. "Are you high?" a dark-skinned shifter asked. "That isn't possible." "Don't worry, ladies," Caspian said, smiling in a disarming way. "We simply decided it was time for a little change." "This is lunacy," I'd exclaimed. There was no way a shifter and a vampire would ever mate. Besides, we were mortal enemies. Vampires and shifters had been killing each other for almost as long as history had been written. "Where are the shifter males?" a girl with brown hair asked. She was small and slight brown eyes, and something about her brought my protective instincts forward. Caspian shook his head slightly and ignored her question, which I took as a bad sign. Right now, they were being nice to us because it served their purposes. But I had a sneaking suspicion our male counterparts hadn't received the same treatment. In fact, something told me with certainty that they were dead. Had I known any of the males who were supposed to be here today? Not really. Some of the packs were spread out through North America, putting wide swaths of country between us. I'd heard of some of them but met only a few. Still, a twinge of pain twisted in my chest. Like us girls, the males had come here to ensure our kind would continue to survive, and now they were likely dead. "Let's not worry about them," Caspian said. "Let's focus on the good. We're here, and I promise you will have a grand time." His face was a bit pinched, as if he didn't quite believe his own spiel. "This year, something different is required, something that will be beneficial for both vampires and shifters. As a nice addition, we'll have cameras to follow the games and let your loved ones know you are safe and sound. Everyone will be able to watch the games from the comfort of their own homes." As he said this, vampires with cameras on their shoulders entered from where they'd likely been hiding and filming this whole time. Cameras? Really? What for? So they could document this unheard of atrocity? I considered all this as I watched the cameraman get into position. Even if it might make my mother and grandfather feel better if they could see me, they would most likely be appalled. Honestly, the only advantage I saw to having an audience was the possibility of crying out for help. All the vampire covens would be watching, but they would only laugh at the sight of shifters in trouble. The humans might tune in for entertainment too, but they would never help. We pretty much lived in different universes. For the most part, they stuck to their kind and let us be. In truth, they were scared of us. So clearly, they wouldn't help us. But the wolf packs, they might defy and try to rescue us. Except I didn't know if the cameras were transmitting live. Their red lights let me know they were recording. But there was only one way to find out. Moving with lightning speed. I yanked my arm free from the vampire who'd gone slack in his guard duties. Whirling, I struck the other with my fist, hitting him in the throat. He gagged and doubled over, coughing, both hands around his neck. But I didn't have time to bask in the glory. Instead, I whirled toward the closest camera before I could take 2 steps. Caspian was there, hands on my biceps. He moved faster than I could process, his body aligning with mine, his coldness seeping into my warm body. He gripped me tightly, pulling my body to his, but I was just as fast. I wrenched his hand back and whirled before striking him in the chest. He glanced down at the spot where it hit him, looking slightly amused, realizing my human form. He was stronger and faster than me. I turned to bolt out the door. Several vamps stepped in my way. As I was readying myself to fight, fingers closed around my arm. I was yanked back. One arm locked across my chest while another cinched around my waist. Caspian's rock, hard body smashed against mine as he held me. "Stop fighting," he growled, holding me tight. "Never." If only I could shift. I kicked back, aiming for a soft spot, but hit one of his tree trunk thighs. He barely seemed to strain as I thrashed, and he kept me tight to him. For the first time, I smelled him vanilla and mint, a tantalizing smell that made me want to turn around and bury my nose in his neck. It expected a rotten stench or the tang of iron, but this was unexpected. I shook my head. He was surely enthralling me again. "Stop doing that," I said through gritted teeth. I was keenly aware of his arm resting above the swell of my breasts, which were straining against my poor excuse for a gown. His skin brushed against mine, making goosebumps appear wherever he touched me. "Doing what?" he whispered in my ear, still pinning me to him. Lips fluttered against the tender skin of my earlobe, and I fought to hold back the shudders of pleasure he was making me feel, messing with my head. I tried to lurch away, but he held me fast. "You can't fight this, Elise." His breath tickled my neck. His charms were too much. I was trying to fight him, but I found myself wanting to climb his body like a tree. "It'll be better, safer for you if you go along with it," he whispered. "I'm not your puppet." I shot back, struggling against him but just managing to rub more of my body on his. "I know," he replied, "but it's already decided. Neither of us has a choice." Then he released me and strode away, leaving me stumbling, disoriented, and confused as hell. Chapter 3, everyone. Follow us. Let's go. As I watched Caspian retreat back, the vampire henchmen got to work. They formed a line, corralling us like cattle into a room down the hall. I wanted to fight them but had twice been defeated. Without my shifter powers, I was no match for this legion of red water suckers. It would be stupid to keep trying. Still, I had to find a way. Maybe my family was planning a rescue, but I was just giving up. They shuffled us into a large waiting room furnished with cushioned settees. Ornate tables sat beside them, topped with food and drink. It seemed as though our captors were set on keeping up appearances, even though this was now our jail. A very pretty jail. But still, I didn't trust that food any more than I trusted the blank-faced henchman. My eyes landed on the scarred guard I'd fought earlier. I meant what I said. He would see me later. The vampires pushed the females together in the center of the room and then blocked the doors on either side while they continued to watch us with hooded eyes. Caspian was nowhere to be found, and neither were the other vampires he'd introduced as our suitors. If this was a game, they were playing it well, making us wait, intimidating us with guards, having us wear slips of fabric and flimsy shoes, stopping us from shifting. In their scheme, we were the lambs, and they were the lions. But I was no sheep. My gaze shifted from the vampires to the females beside me. There were, in fact, 10, including me. Some looked scared. A few stood defiantly. Isolde Thorne looked like she was about to give them a 1-star Yell preview. Somehow her teased blonde hair was still perfect. No nails broken and false lashes still intact. Her perky boobs bounced as she flounced into one of the chairs, still throwing eye daggers at all the guards. I admired her spunk even if our families had never seen eye to eye. The girl beside me, the doe-eyed brunette I'd noticed earlier, trembled as she hugged herself. She had somewhat stood her ground earlier, but it seemed it had cost her. A small cut on her forehead was trickling red water down one side of her face, yet she hadn't made any effort to clean it up. Some of these girls were never trained to fight or, apparently, taught to take care of themselves. Some packs used females for breeding purposes only, never allowing them out on hunts or raids. I couldn't imagine what it might be like if that had been my fate. The way they were treated was so unfair. Fresh red water was likely a bad idea around all these vampires. Someone had to do something. I leaned toward her and tried to offer a reassuring look. "Hi, I'm Elise. What's your name?" Her wet eyes peered up at me, a mask of fear tightening her features. "Oh, I'm Willow." She lifted thin shoulders up and down as if her name were of no consequence, and she wasn't quite sure why I would want to know it. The strap of her purple dress slid off. Her hand shook as she pushed it up. "Did you know you have a cut?" I pointed to her forehead, where the trickle of red water meandered. "It's probably we should maybe do something about that." Delicate fingers slid up and probed the spot. Sneering red water. Oh, my moons." She stared at her red watery fingers and looked as though she might faint. "It's okay. It's a small cut. It will heal really quick on its own. We just have to clean it." I grabbed her arms in case she did collapse and walked her to one of the fancy chairs nearby. Helping her sit down, I searched the room until I spotted a box of tissues on a side table. Quickly, I wiped up the red water and pressed a clean tissue to the wound. "Hold this here until the bleeding stops." She placed trembling fingers on the tissue, doing as I instructed. "Thanks. No problem. This is all pretty crazy." She nodded, eyes darting up at the vampires before she let them flick back to my face. "What is all this? What are they going to do with us?" I shook my head. "Nothing good." Willow bit her lip. Would she cry? What would I do if she did? I was more equipped to doctor wounds than fix emotional issues. But to my relief, she kept the tears at bay. "My parents are probably freaking out." She blinked large brown eyes at me, reminding me of a lost puppy dog. "Don't worry," I said, pointing at the cameras in the room's corners. "I'm sure they can see that you're all right." She leaned close, whispering in my ear. "Do you think they really want to mate with us?" I pondered this for the first time. It seemed ridiculous. Vampires were created, not mated. I grew up in a pack where we never mingled with vampires, and we called them red water suckers or worse. I listened at my grandfather's feet as he told stories of their cruelty to our kind. For the better part of history, they had tried to exterminate us. The fighting had been brutal. Both our numbers were dwindling for many reasons, but our constant feuds were certainly one of the biggest factors. Lately, we had come to relative peace, but it was nothing to write home about. We still hated each other. So no, I didn't think they wanted to mate with us. Something else was up. "Sit close to me," I whispered to Willow. "Keep your head down and don't draw attention to yourself. I'm going to figure out a way to get out of here." Her doe eyes held mine. "Thank you," she whispered. I shook my head as I gazed at the vampire henchman that stood between me and freedom. Don't thank me yet. We waited quietly for a few moments. Slowly, our guards' attention waned. A few of them gathered together, joking about something. One was glancing at his phone. Another was watching one of the girls with a lustful curiosity. These goons didn't seem to be the cream of the crop. That or they were overconfident. Either way, not smart. No wonder they depict the others as the viable suitors instead of this lot. Grandfather had explained that vampires had social classes, much like our shifter packs. There were the wealthy vamps, the social elite. Their faces were plastered all over social media and magazines. You couldn't escape it if you tried. Many girls, humans, and shifters alike gladly overlooked their red water sucking tendencies and swooned over them. Then there were the lower classes, which were the weaker, younger vampires. They were likely freshly made, or those that had fallen out of favor of the upper echelon, since vampires could live basically forever. The older you were, the more wealth and prestige you could amass. This created a sort of caste system, one I didn't really understand. One the Nightshades clearly did, since they managed to become the head of it. Frankly, I couldn't get past the being dead part. Either way, I wasn't planning on sticking around long enough to find out what the vampire's intentions truly were. I watched the guards closely. My mind turned until it took shape. Willow, I have a plan. Can you make a big fuss about your head wound? Wave the red water around. See if that will get their attention. Her eyes widened, filling with panic. It won't hurt you, I reassured her. If they wanted to hurt us, they would have done it already. I need to get a look around and see if I can get us out of here. Willow nodded. You can count on me. Despite appearing weak and falling apart after a confrontation, she had a brave streak. Good. Pulling the tissue from her forehead, she headed towards the first set of doors with the red watery tissue in one outstretched hand. Help. I'm bleeding. The vampires whirled toward her, and their eyes locked on the red water, bright red against the white paper. If they had smelled it before, they'd have been able to ignore it, but now that it was thrust into their faces, a few of them acquired a predatory expression. As we watched, their eyes darkened and fangs began to elongate. Oh moons. Willow, this might not have been the best plan. What if they ate her? I started forward, ready to put myself between her and the ravenous-looking vamps, but two of the guards beat me to it. I didn't know if they were older or just better at controlling themselves, but they didn't succumb to their red water thirst and quickly dragged the others out of the room, leaving one of the doors unattended. I watched for a moment to make sure Willow was safe, then sprinted for the exit. Gripping the handle, I threw one of the doors open. I started to run out, but a massive figure blocked my path. Leaving so soon? I glanced up, and there he was, Mr. Eligible Bachelor himself, Caspian Nightshade. Chapter 4. Get out of my way. I stared Caspian down, wheeling him aside with my determined gaze. It had one chance at escape, and he'd ruin it. And here he was, blocking me from my freedom and from the chance to perhaps come back with reinforcements to free everyone. Caspian didn't seem impressed with my ferocity. However, his voice was level as he addressed me. I smelled red water and heard a commotion and came to see if I could help her. He'd been able to smell that from outside the room. He was a vampire, so I suppose that made sense. It just highlighted how little I knew about my enemy. You have some red water on your hands, he went on, and I sensed more in the room. What's going on? His dark eyes searched my body, looking for wounds. I tried hard not to shiver as he regarded me, doing everything in my power to keep a clear head, since I knew he was doing everything in his power to draw me to him. His ability to enthrall had to be powerful. Even now, as he peered over my shoulder, I felt drawn to him. The pull in my chest rivaled that of a full moon, but there was another sensation too. Something more than just attraction to his physical beauty, which was exquisite eyes that peered into me, those full red lips, that perfect physique. They were enough to knock the panties off any hot, red-watered girl. But as if that weren't enough, there was also a raw animalistic hunger that captured me when he was near. One that made my head swim, my legs tingle, my mouth water. It had to be magic. There was no other explanation. I cleared my throat. We don't need anything. Thanks. So it'll just be going. When I tried to slip around him, he put an arm on the door frame, blocking me. Are you sure? There seems to be a problem brewing on the other side of the room. His eyes darted up, and I spotted my chance. Dipping down, I slid under his arm and tore out into the hallway before he could stop me. Wait, Elise. I didn't stop. Their feet slapping on the shiny tile. I sprinted down the hall as Caspian called out to me again. I had no idea where I was going, but knew there had to be an exit around here somewhere. The hallway had doors on either side, but, sadly, no windows, and trying the doorknobs was out of the question. I had no time for doors that might be locked. I needed a clear shot to the courtyard, and once outside, maybe my shifting powers would return. Even if they didn't, I felt the outdoors would provide me with some advantage. When the hallway banked right, I went with it and ran straight into Caspian. What the hell? I was just surprised to do much more than smash into him and curse. He moved like lightning, one hand shooting forward to grip my wrist in a firm but gentle way. You keep running like that and you're bound to wear yourself out before the games even begin. Let me go. I'm getting out of here, and you're not going to stop me. I expected another fight, but instead, he dropped my arm. Be my guest. I tried not to let the shock register on my face. Instead, I focused on the set of doors behind him, circling around the vamp. I ran at them, yanked on the handles, and threw the doors wide. Fresh night air greeted me, as did a second-story balcony. I stepped forward. I could make that drop and be out across the garden in no. Once more, I ran headfirst into something hard. Except this time it wasn't a sexy vampire but some sort of invisible barrier. The collision startled me, as did the fact that I was no longer standing in the doorway. It'd been thrown back, nearly crashing into the far wall before I could get my feet under me. Shaking my head, I tried to clear my vision as I stared at the open doorway. Caspian leaned against the doorframe and crossed his arms over his chest. A magical force field placed there entirely for your protection. Save your lives. Ice that. There's no way out, I added under my breath. Hopelessness settling heavily on me. The force field blocks all windows and doors, as I'm sure you can guess, Caspian said, making sure I was watching him. He strode through the barrier and turned to face me. They only were con shifters. Vampires can come and go as they please. He gazed at me smugly as he tilted his head up to the moonlight. Nice night out here. Infuriating jackass. You think you're so smart. I shot back. But you don't know my pack strength. Our will. You don't know what we're capable of under pressure. Mark my words. You'll get free. I can't wait to see you try. He replied, still smiling that smug smile. He stepped through the barrier and walked towards me, stopping when he was within arm's reach. If this is a game, I'm not playing. There's no way I'd willingly participate when a worthless red water sucker is the prize. The words cut through his calm exterior. The smile fell from his face as his mouth and fist tightened. Would he try to fight me now? Well, let him. I was ready. But Mr. Eligible Bachelor had better control over his vampire emotions than most. He merely sniffed and shook his shoulders out. When he spoke, his tone was calm, which made him even more infuriated. The playfulness was gone from his voice, and I had a feeling I was finally seeing the real Caspian Nightshade. I don't know what you think this is, Elise, but it's not a game. His eyes darted back and forth as if checking to see if any cameras were around before continuing. From what I understand, your pack has grown to weaken. Everyone knows it. Unless you want something terrible to happen to your family, you'd better get it through your skull that this is happening. I stared at him, speechless. That wasn't possible. Everyone couldn't be aware of our precarious situation. We'd done everything in our power to keep things secret. We couldn't risk losing our lands, our status, or worse. Grandfather was growing older, and my father had shown no interest in following in his lead as Edric Alpha. Dad had always been a quiet, sensitive type, the kind the other packs would eat for breakfast if they had the chance. So we'd been cautious, keeping our vulnerabilities close to the vest. But if everyone knew, then my family was in greater danger than we'd imagined, especially since Caspian's words had sounded like a threat. Would they really try to harm my family if I didn't do as they said? Go get changed for dinner, Caspian commanded as my thoughts spun. And maybe be a good girl and show up with a new attitude. He whirled and walked away as I stood there, shocked by his words. I clenched my fists, wanting to show him a thing or two about my attitude. Except maybe he was right. I was trapped here, and I needed to be careful about my choices. I couldn't risk putting my family in danger, especially when I didn't know exactly what was going on. These were the mating games. After all, I need Chapter 5, Be a Good Girl. I ground my teeth as I replayed the hallway scene over and over. Caspian was an ass, but his words rang true. My pack had been growing weaker. Was that why I had been sent here in the first place? A match with a male from a powerful pack would solidify our hierarchy for another generation. It would protect us from rivals and ensure offspring that could survive. Unfortunately, pups had been few and far between lately, and those that survived were frail. My generation was the last strong and healthy one. Only one pup had been born after me, my aunt and uncle's daughter, Lizzie, and my parents had only been blessed with one child. No one was sure what was happening, but my grandfather felt he knew how to fix it, send me out to find a strong mate. Our family hadn't had to participate in the competition for many years, but things were changing, like I needed that on my shoulders. But what now? Ave Empire as a mate. No, I could never. Besides, how would that help our status at all? Packs and covens didn't intermingle, let alone date or make babies. I didn't even know if that was possible. Sure, it heard of rumors of viable matings between the two species, but it also heard there was a Loch Ness monster and a man on the moon, and we all knew that was fake. Isn't this nice? I glanced up to see Willow slip into the chair beside me. We were in the shared suite they assigned us, a large, expansive area with 2 bedrooms, a shared bathroom, a giant closet, and a beautifying area. I'd never seen anything like it. The tall ceilings and expensive furniture were far more luxurious than what we had back home. Everything was dipped in gold or sparkled with crystal. My mahogany bed frame held a bed so large one could get lost in it for days. There were fresh flowers on the side tables, making the room smell like I imagined the gardens outside did. The ones we could only see and not experience. Yeah, those. Trays of finger sandwiches, cakes, and fresh fruits at on tables full whenever we got peckish. It was as if every one of our desires was thought about and accounted for. Everyone except that of freedom. A gilded cage, I thought, as I settled into the crushed, velvet armchair in the salon area of our suite. After the incident in the common room, the guards escorted the females to their rooms in pairs. Willow and I had been assigned the suite together, something I was grateful for since I was pretty sure I would have to suffocate that assaulted girl with a pillow on night 1 if it hung around her much longer. My relief ended. However, once they started the beautifying process, we'd been stripped, scrubbed, and tweezed. Well, Willow had. It told one servant if she came near me with those tweezers, I was going to put them somewhere so deep she would have baby tweezers 9 months later. She had been a smart girl and decided my eyebrows were the prettiest she'd ever seen. What, exactly, are we being dolled up for? I asked one of the vampire servant girls as she shoved high heels on my feet. Weren't we dolled up enough already? I didn't think I could take much more primping. Dinner, one of the maids said. They were dressed in matching black and white uniforms that called to mind maids from the 19th century. The outfit matched the castle's decor, but not the vampire women themselves. I pictured them in leather, stalking the night streets, searching for prey. Yet, here they were, subdued and proper. However, the vampire girls didn't seem too happy to be pampering shifter women, and I didn't blame them. If I were in their shoes, I wouldn't like it either. I would be pissed that their males were searching for mating prospects among their enemies and not their own kind. The question was why. Maybe the vampires only wanted to marry us so they could legally steal our lands. Or perhaps this was a ploy to eradicate us completely. Either way, no good could come from it. Don't you think it's weird? I said to Willow, leaning over in my armchair when the vampire servant stepped out to find another pair of heels. Why would vampires want to mate with shifters? I mean, is that even possible? Willow shrugged. Maybe vampire girls are boring. These ones seem to be. My new friend's long brown hair had been styled in ringlets that fell delicately over slim shoulders. Her dinner dress was lavender and contrasted nicely with her tan skin. It seemed purple was her favorite hue, and it suited her as well as her name. She was really lovely, sweet, and demure. Maybe Caspian would want her as his plaything. Why did I have a feeling she might not mind? It doesn't make sense. I repeated in a hurried whisper lest the maids came back and heard us. Are they trying to start a war? Irritate the shifters into making the first move. Why else would they kill eligible males and steal all the females? Willow's eyes went wide. They killed the males. Oh, had she not considered that? What if she knew or was related to one or more of them? I quickly backpedaled. I don't know that for sure. I'm just speculating. They're probably fine. I'm sure they're home watching this all on TVO. She blinked long, mascara at eyelashes as my words washed over her. I just assumed they asked them to go home. Maybe they did. I patted her arm. I wasn't sure why, since she was the same age as me, but I felt protective of Willow. Maybe it was her doe eyes or her thin frame or the fact that her hands shook whenever there was a loud noise. Whatever the reason, I knew I had to protect her. Whatever was going on here, things weren't set up in our favor. And even if Willow could muster up a bit of courage when needed, she appeared to be the kind of person who found it easier to go along with the flow of things. She shook her head. I just came here to mate. I didn't expect any of this. I've never even been outside of our territory. They kept you in. She nodded. I'm the eldest daughter. The only thing I'm good for is finding a good match. And now Willow bit her lip as her chin wobbled. I'm sure your family doesn't think mating is your only purpose. You don't know my father. She gave a humorless laugh. The mating games are all HES talked about since I was a child. Make a good impression. Willow, get a strong match. He literally has talked to me about anything else. I wondered what I would be like if my parents hadn't let me run with the boys. Trained to fight and hunt and take care of myself. This situation would be utterly terrifying. I'm still working on a way out. I told her, don't lose hope. He'll figure something out. Willow opened her mouth to say something, but the vampire servant re-entered the room, holding a pair of gold kitten eels that matched the dress they shoved me into. Will you wear these? The vampire servant asked, looking miffed. Maybe it'd been a bit of a pain in her ass, but I hated all the fussing. They weren't fooling me with all the glitz and glamour. We were still in jail, but maybe I could win her over to my good side. What's your name? I asked the pale vampire. Morika. Her dark eyes, made darker by gray eyeshadow and liner, evaluated me as if scanning for threats. She could clearly take care of herself out there. I wondered what had brought her here to act as a servant to people she clearly despised. I wondered if they deforced her. I put on my sweetest smile. Morika. I'm Elise and this is Willow. Her lips folded into a thin line, clearly unaffected by my charms, or lack thereof. No. I'm sorry if I VE made your job here hard. We were not exactly prepared for how this all went down, if you know what I mean. She blinked, still holding the heels in front of her like a shield, yeah. Well, I'm wondering if you know anything about why we're here. I tried another warm smile, but she frowned back at me. Her eyes drifted to the door behind her where the other maid might appear at any minute. "We're not supposed to say anything to you." I know, I said, leaning forward. "But from one girl to another. We don't always have to do what the men tell us. Right?" Morika's eyes flicked from mine to the door and back. "But he'll get fired." So maybe they hadn't forced her but offered us some she couldn't resist. Whether she wanted to be here or not. Not if they don't know. I leaned closer to her conspiratorially. Morika seemed to consider my words, which I took as a good sign. Willow nodded, her curls bobbing like coils. "We won't say anything. Pinky promise." "Good girl." My friend was catching on nicely. Morika hesitated, then seemed to make up her mind. "The vampire covens are worried," she whispered, leaning close and clutching the shoes to her chest. "Elders seem to have a strange illness and are growing weak. Even trying to create new vampires is failing more than usual. Something bad is happening." I sat back in my chair as I took this all in. Her words sounded so familiar. Was that exactly what our pack had been going through? Loss of fertility, dwindling populations. Were the other shifter packs seeing the same thing? If they were, they'd been keeping the information close to the vest like we were. "How long has this been happening?" I asked, but Morika was already backing out of the room. She set the shoes on the floor by the door. "I've said too much. Dinner is at 7. Before I could stop her, Morika slipped out of the room and shut the door behind her. We heard her footsteps down the hallway and out of the suite's main doors. And then she was gone. Well, that was weird. Willow whirled a chocolate brown ringlet around one finger as her face screwed up and thought. "It might be the info we need to get out of here," I said, my brain alight with ideas. If the vampires were weak, it would mean getting out of here might be easier than I thought. But Caspian didn't appear sick. In fact, he seemed like the poster child of vampire health. Did this sickness only affect old vampires? How old was old for vampires? Anyway, was William affected? He didn't seem sick either, though we'd barely seen him except lurking in the background. Of course, a weak vampire was still stronger than a human or a shifter stuck in their human form, which was likely the reason they deblocked our inability to morph into our wolf forms. Maybe the illness explained what arrogant bastard Caspian was. That level of smugness just wasn't healthy, though it certainly didn't explain the strange attraction I felt to him, even though I despised everything he stood for. It had to be the enthrall powers, and I had to figure out how to avoid their influence so I didn't get all starry at any time he was near. The info the vampire servant gave me had to be a clue, one I would keep on hounding until I found a way to use it to my advantage. The sound of our exterior door opening again drew me out of my thoughts. I expected Morika or the other maid, but instead it was Isolde, the shifter female who'd shown so much spunk during our introductions and who also got on my nerves like a buzzing mosquito. "The ladies are gathering in the sitting room at 630 for drinks," she said, peering around our room, her teased hairdo entering before she did. "You all should come." Drinks. Had she become that comfortable already? Or maybe the drinks were part of some sort of plan that would help her escape. That had to be it. Maybe she was so bad. After all, what is this really about? I asked in a whisper. Isolde looked at me as if I were stupid. She gave a little snort and sucked her teeth before saying, "It's about having a little bit of fun." Silly. Was she for real? There's no fun for us here. We need to find a way to escape. Isolde shrugged and adjusted her push-up bra. All I am interested in is, what the hell was she playing at? Either she had air for brains or she distrusted me even when a bigger, badder enemy was at hand. Her pack had always pushed the boundaries of my grandfather's authority as the Edric Alpha, so maybe that had something to do with her attitude. Willow sat up straight, her eyes brightening. "Oh yes, that sounds fun, right, Elise?" I was too keen on the idea of sipping martinis with Isolde. She was the kind of person I would befriend on the outside, but it wouldn't do to stay cooped up in here, if I was to figure out a way to escape. I had to take every opportunity to learn all I could, even if the others seemed far comfortable or cagey for my taste. Play the game. Elise. Sure, I said, trying to sound genuine. Girl time. Yeah, girl time, Willow said brightly, clapping a little. Isolde didn't even bother to seem amused. Sure, girl time. See you then, she mumbled before slipping out and shutting the door. I didn't like Isolde at all. I frowned at Willow, trying to figure her out. One moment she was scared, and the next, she was all excited about having drinks. What was up with that? Maybe she was hoping to find safety in numbers. Or maybe she didn't want to rely solely on me to figure out an escape plan. Yeah, that was probably it. We finished getting ready. There wasn't much left to do after all the pampering the vampire servants had done, but we refreshed our lipstick and sprayed our hair. By 6:30, we were heading to the sitting room. It was strange to walk freely through the halls. I knew it was because of those downforce fields, which had mentioned to the others to save them from getting blasted, but that didn't mean I cowed and to investigate. The problem was I didn't get a chance, not with Willow's death grip on my arm. One she used to drag me into the room with the other females and plop me in a chair, insisting that I stay there while she got me a drink no matter how much I protested. While she went to the bar, I glanced around at the other women. They'd all been dolled up, much as we had. Each was wearing a unique evening gown in a different color of the rainbow. Many wore their hair down in waves like Willow, but a few had fancy ponytails or buns with hair piled up on the top of their heads. Glitter jewels sparkled from their ears and necks. All were wearing high heels. All this glamour is stupid, I mused, thinking I would give my left arm for a pair of pants and flat shoes. I scanned each face, noticing plenty of furtive glances and apprehension from everyone. The air was thick with tension. Willow came back with a few females, which Shed quickly befriended. There were Sylvia and Nanette, both beautiful, strong, and formidable candidates. After that, the names became a blur as sparkly dress after sparkly dress whizzed by, as I was trying to remember names and start a conversation about banding together and planning an escape. The doors opened and the camera crew swept in. Damn, I'd forgotten about the intrusive filming aspect of this. To me, the idea went from irritating to downright stupid, but some of the other females seemed to play right into their hands. Isolde popped up immediately and made a beeline for the camera. I watched as she talked animatedly, smiling and playing it up for an audience. Maybe that was her plan, to charm the socks out of everyone in order to escape. Could that work? I couldn't see how. Shall be seen live by every coven and pack in the country, Willow said, sitting beside me. Every pack in the country. Was she sending some secret rescue message by batting the hell out of her fake eyelashes? Maybe she knew Morse code or something. Except I didn't think we needed to be that covert about it. They should just shout, "Save us. We're being held against our will." As I rose, intent on making my way to the camera, several vampire guards slipped in. "Dinner is served," one of them announced. I glanced up and saw it was Scarface. I narrowed my eyes, giving him a look that let him know I hadn't forgotten. Sadly, he didn't give me the satisfaction of a reaction. Perhaps the cameras were meant to control the shifter females' behavior as well as the vampires. Taking that cue, the camera crew ended their interview with Isolde and headed out, probably to set up in the dining room because how could they miss the opportunity to show off our first group date? "Let's go," I said, pulling Willow along this time. "But my drink," she said, stumbling after me. I pulled her at a fast clip toward the smell of food and the sound of violins. The dining room's double doors were open, letting the sights and sounds of an expensive banquet hall spill out to meet us. I spotted a long table with chairs all around. Each place setting was intricately beautiful, down to the sparkling silvered plates. Goblets of wine and water sparkled in the light of the crystal chandelier. Fresh flowers bloomed from vases on side tables and sat in neat clusters in containers that ran down the center of the long table. Additional vampire staff and butler outfits waited along the walls, ready to serve us, or keeping up appearances. All of this probably looked great on camera, but it made my stomach churn. My gaze was pulled to the 7 vampire suitors placed strategically around the long table. It was hard to miss the fact that Caspian stood at the head of the table with one seat next to him, ready for some lucky girl. If I had to bet money, I figured it would be Isolde. She had surely made an impression. She just picked out a chair nearest to the cameras when I heard my name. "Elise," Caspian said, pulling out the chair next to him. "Would you come join me, please?"